Hello, everyone. This is Lemko with History. Today, I have with me Maria Silvestri, and I will be asking her some questions. So I guess for the first one, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your work?
Sure. I am the president of the John and Helen Timo Foundation. We're the only private foundation or philanthropy that exists in the Carpatho-Rusyn world right now. And so we do a lot of projects on our own, but we also participate and cooperate on projects with other organizations and individuals. And it's all to promote and support Carpatho-Rusyn culture, and when possible, sometimes where that interacts with Eastern Christianity.
And so you've made two documentaries with John Righetti, While Even Tears Were Not Enough, and also Resurrection of a Nation. Can you tell us a little bit more how you met John Righetti and why you two decided to make those two documentaries so far?
I don't even remember when I met John Righetti, but I was younger than 10 years old. So we've known each other for a really long time. Actually, our first attempt at a documentary was Changed by Tyler Hoff, which is about World War I, the concentration camp in Graz, Austria in World War I. And one of the things that happened is after the foundation was founded, we also, we're always talking about ideas. And one of those things was that we are so bad as a community, unfortunately, at remembering anniversaries. Some of our neighbor groups have, 1,000 years since the founding of Ukraine happened in the late 80s, or some anniversaries surrounding Cyril and Methodius that the Slovaks were really good at pouncing on. And what about us? And so, unfortunately for us, unfortunately, in some ways, I guess we could say, we had two tragedies to start off with commemorating, which is Tyler Hoff during World War I, which is the pretty much eradication of the Lemko intelligentsia, and then Akcja, which was the entire cultural ethnocide of Lemkos and their compact settlement in the homeland. So that was in 1947. So we made Even Tears Were Not Enough for the 70th anniversary of that in 2017. And then our most recent documentary, which we launched last year, is The Resurrection of a Nation, which is wonderful to make something about the revival of the Carpatho-Rusyn cultural movement in the post-1989 period.
So, Resurrection of a Nation is the story of the revival, and While Even Tears Were Not Enough is, kind of probably one of the worst events in Rusyn history. Which one do you feel was a harder movie to get right?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt, Even Tears Were Not Enough. No question. That's something where it was it remains extremely important to honor the memory and the survivors who we interviewed, and also those who already passed away, and those who we did not interview who are still alive as well. So, what I hope we did with that documentary was to make a really good composite story. But it was tremendously difficult to make. It was tremendously difficult to edit. And it always is, but that was really hard. Yeah.
So how long a production time did it take for both of those movies?
All of these projects have been about 2 years. The thing that takes the longest is actually the translating. In the process, the Timo Foundation has made the largest amount of human translated Rusyn to English in corpus in quite a while of native speakers speaking Rusyn. So we've had some interesting projects that have kind of spun off just from having this massive amounts of texts, but that also human translated those transcripts is what absolutely takes the longest. But it's a really important part of the process, because of course we want people to have access to the Rusyn language. So we want people also, as part of these documentaries, to hear native speakers speaking the Rusyn language and have access to that. in a really high quality way.
And so going off that, can you tell us a little bit about the foundation name and kind of the reason behind that, by chance?
Yeah, sure. John and Helen Timo were my grandparents. They were big Rusyn patriots. They really loved their culture, their people, and they wanted to do what they could to help support that as part of their legacy.
And so, is there any like big thing that that people misunderstand from your movies that you found, or maybe Carpatho-Rusyns in general?
I think that hopefully with the documentaries, people. Let me put it this way: these are documentaries about things that, in many cases, people don't even know that they should know about. Right? Yeah. So people don't know about Tallerhof before they saw this documentary. A lot of people maybe knew about Akcja Wisła, but maybe didn't know maybe didn't know a lot of the details, hadn't had the opportunity to hear from survivors in this way. So, and then even the resurrection of the nation, on one hand, there's a lot of people still alive that are like, oh, that was like only 30 years ago. Yeah. And for a lot of people, it's like, wow, that was a long time ago already, right? So, and that was also kind of tricky because that's something that, you know, exists for a lot of us in living memory. Yeah. But even then, for example, we showed it in Slovakia last October, right? You know, the month before, you know, right, the month before the exact 30th anniversary. And some of the, like my young Rusyn friends and colleagues in Slovakia said, wow, like these are people that we've known our whole lives, but we didn't know what they did for us. Oh, wow. So, you know, that's the sort of thing that, you know, maybe it's not a misunderstanding, but it's like, we don't know what we don't know until we find out that we don't know it, right?
Yeah. Of course. And so, I mean, going off that kind of message of, you know, you don't really know what you don't know until you know it. You know, from what you've told me about the name of the foundation, you know, I think it's a common theme with a lot of American Rusyns that they have no idea that they are Rusyn. I assume you've known you were Rusyn for a long time, or how long have you known, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. No, this
your
is
whole
something.
Life?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been part of my whole life. And that's a huge part of why I think I'm able to do a lot of what I do. You know, you were kind of, before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about your grandparents, and I think for so many Carpatho-Rusyns, a lot of this is because no matter what generation you are, you have a really fond memory of your grandparents. And that's sort of like what we sort of celebrate, and why a lot of us do what we do, because we want to honor that in some way. And that's the case for me. But growing up, this was also something that we, you know, being Rusyn was something that we did as a family together. You know, this was in this period of the, you know, beginnings of that cultural revival also here in the United States. So this was stuff we did together as a family. We're from Pittsburgh, so there was always a lot of stuff going on. From the age of 4, I was in the Slaviane Folk Ensemble, which is the oldest Carpatho-Rusyn folk ensemble here in the United States. By age 6, I was at, you know, visiting my relatives in like Rusyn, northeastern Slovakia for the first time. Yeah. You know, my whole life has been about that, and being able to, you know, have current Carpatho-Rusyn, the current Carpatho-Rusyn experience has always been part of my life here. And then I've been able to experience that in the homeland in Europe too. And that's been huge.
And so I guess because you've been in the community for so long, and you've been trying to get the message out there, so to speak, you know, what has been the greatest moment for you?
I don't know. You know, it's that's a really hard and interesting question. Yeah. I think that, you know, we kind of, it's weird because maybe I'm not going to answer this question, but you know, sometimes when I'm in Europe, I go visit friends and family and in villages, and we go like pick weeds out in the field. That's something that's not something that I do publicly. That's not something that but that is something that gives me a connection that is like, hey, this is what my family has been doing for the last like thousand years,
Yeah.
and having that connection feels really good. And then it feels like, yeah, this is the right thing. Or another thing that like really is cool in the last couple years, we've had friends and scholars and colleagues come from Transcarpathia, especially to the United States to do work, to take them around to places in, especially Pennsylvania, both here in Pittsburgh and also in other parts of the state where Rusyn history happened that really affected the Carpatho-Rusyn community life in Europe, especially in the interwar period. That's awesome. Like that feels really good, because then it's like, hey, it's not just about Europe, like also we as American Carpatho-Rusyns have contributed a lot to that, and we can share that with each other. So that those are those moments that like feel really good,
Yeah. What do you feel like is up next for you?
We always have stuff in the pipeline. I am super energized by people like you who are doing new stuff that just kind of is bubbling to the top in really great ways. Certainly, we're very interested in continuing to give people really good access to education. People like you and me have had access to high quality information about Carpatho-Rusyns our whole lives. And so then we've been able to, I think in a lot of ways, sort of re-educate our families about who we are, right? And I think that that's not just you, that's not just me. Certainly I have friends here in the US and also in Europe who have found this and taken it back to their families. And so we want to like keep doing things to help people to do that. Certainly we're also a grant making organization, so there are projects that we have in the pipeline that with others that are also aimed at the same thing, which is getting information about Carpatho-Rusyns from our own perspective into the hands of Carpatho-Rusyns and our allies in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, just from my own experience, just when I found out, when I even told my own family, they all really accepted it very quickly. And just the messages I've gotten so far on my videos, especially from younger people, has been really outstanding. I would have never thought there was this many people that would have actually really been interested in it, but there really are quite a few. So,
but like, why should anybody have a problem with it, right? There's no.
That's true. That's
true.
true.
And I think also it should, I hope, be really comforting to be able to define oneself in a positive way, and not like, well, we're not Polish, we're not Slovak, we're not Russian, we're not Ukrainian, but we, like, so once we have, we have a name for this, it's not a recently made up name. This is,
yes.
This has been around for a while. There is a long history of Carpatho-Rusyn consciousness, both here in the United States and in Europe. And so it should be a really happy thing. And then, it's always nice to kind of be the expert bringing really great information to people that you care about, right?
No, it's definitely a good feeling. I mean, I don't do nearly as intensive or as high quality work as you do, but even my videos, it feels quite good. So
yeah, it should. You should feel good about it.
Yeah,
and I'm waiting. So like, this is not a contest. We're not in competition here.
Oh, like, of course,
we're all adding to the like same like community content.
Yeah, no, I agree. What would you say has been the most negative experience?
I think there's a couple things, and I'll speak in generalities. The first is we certainly see, I grew up here in Pittsburgh in a very ethnic community. We certainly had contact with people of other ethnic groups. It's really rude and inconsiderate to tell somebody else that they or their ethnic group does not exist. That has happened to many of us. especially by groups whose existence is being threatened by others. So, like, what makes that okay? That's just like wanting to find somebody smaller than you to step on. That's not cool.
No, it's not.
I think also certainly in the organizational life of any community, or, we see this in our jobs or wherever, it can be sometimes really hard to work with people, even if you think you have the same goal. So sometimes it's really, it's always talk about what is a good feeling. It's always awesome to find people that you can like have enough in common with to say like, hey, yeah, cool. Like, let's go do this together and like, let's do something awesome. But sometimes it doesn't happen, and that's really a drag. And then the other thing that I find to be very frustrating is within our own community, and this is hard because, we've already talked about how we often have really good memories of our grandparents or, in our extended family, but memory is a really tricky thing. And so sometimes when people have memories that they think are fact that are actually conflicting with facts, and then they insist that this is the truth because their grandmother told them, that's become almost like a meme because it's really challenging. We have to be confident enough in our knowledge and understanding of history, and respectful enough of our memories and how imperfect they are. So within our own community, it's one of those things where the amount of times I want to be like, sorry, your grandmother did not drink tea from a samovar. She probably never saw a Cossack in her life. All of these things, like, that's frustrating. But I would like to think that the more that we kind of think about this stuff, the more we can sort of check our own flawed memories against the facts.
And so I would definitely agree that that's happened even in my own family. I would say that last part, it's definitely, especially the older relatives, it's definitely been a little bit of struggle with that.
And that, just it's sort of difficult because that's also a generation that did not have access to the European homeland. Did not, like, until you kind of like have really great maps to work with, until you start like hiking around these hills and you can actually see in an experience that like, hey, people probably didn't cross mountains this way. This is not probably how this happened. Then, look, myths in general are things that we tell ourselves about things that we don't understand. So, as we start to have deeper understanding, then we can be mythbusters as well.
Is there anything you would like the Lemko with History community to know about? Anything they'd like to look up? Just anything you want to talk about or want them to know, you're fully open to.
No, I would just like, I'm always a little bit, I hope, of an agitator. I think it's super important for all of us, no matter where we are, to, this comes up in conversation a lot, like with my friends. I have a lot of friends who know a lot about Carpatho-Rusyns because I don't give them the option of, saying yes or no, right? So, I think it's really important, and I encourage all of us to, when this comes up in conversation, and I think it does, to share about who you are, which means to say that you're Carpatho-Rusyn, to not be like, oh yeah, like I'm Slovak or I'm Polish just because that's where your village is today. It might not be there tomorrow. There's a lot that's like, that we can say about who we are that really shares that. And I think, as we were talking about earlier, and also sort of based on what Michal said the other day, culture is defined on the basis of difference. And it's something that makes us special when we can say that we're Carpatho-Rusyn. So that's the thing to like, I hope that people feel comfortable learning enough on their own and with the help of others, so that when people ask them who they are, they're like, hey, I'm Carpatho-Rusyn, and I want to explain that to you. And it's also, people are always often saying like, well, how do I do that? And it's super easy. Carpatho-Rusyns are an ethnic and linguistic minority who live in parts of Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Ukraine, and Romania. If you want to go deeper than that, depends on how many beers you have, right? But
Of course,
I
of
think, like,
course.
you know, it's just one of those things where, like, none of our neighbors ever define themselves in any other way other than who they are, and we have to get into the habit of doing that as well, and there's no reason not to.
Exactly. I agree with that. I agree. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
It has been a wonderful interview. I really do appreciate it. And I look forward to your new documentaries and anything else that you're putting out. So.
Yeah, I don't know that there's going to be any more documentaries. It's a lot of hard work, but there will be a lot more coming up. So thank you so much. Have a good
All
evening.
right.